The tweet hit the screen like a storm. Karoline Leavitt's face, a sharp look of determination, her mouth set in a near smirk, accompanied by a single line of text. Asterisk, the old way of doing things is over. It's time for a new era. Watch this space. Asterisk, 1,000 notifications popped up in response, the reactions almost immediate, some in support, some furious, but all of them ready to spread her message across the digital universe. Sitting in the corner of a sleek, glass-walled conference room in Washington, Karoline wasn't watching the chatter unfold. She was listening to the hum of her phone as the world buzzed around her. Her colleagues, an older generation of political strategists, seemed out of place in this room. They had no understanding of what she was doing, not really. They were clinging to traditional campaigning methods, rallies, speeches, television ads, thinking they still held the key to political influence. But Karoline knew better. She wasn't here for the past. She was here for the future. Her eyes flickered up to the man across the table, a seasoned senator who'd spent more years in politics than she had in life. His voice boomed through the room, cutting through the air like a blade, as he launched into yet another speech about how things had always worked. "We need to keep things professional, Karoline," he said, adjusting his thick glasses. "The electorate isn't going to buy into some online viral gimmick. People want experience. They want someone they can trust." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. He didn't believe his own words anymore. He didn't understand the landscape shifting beneath him. Karoline's eyes narrowed. She wasn't fazed, not one bit. She leaned forward in her chair, her fingers lightly tapping the screen of her phone, as though testing how much longer she could hold back the tidal wave she was about to unleash. She had to get this just right. "With all due respect, Senator," she began, her voice calm yet cutting through the tension like a hot knife through butter, "you're stuck in the past. People aren't just voting for candidates anymore. They're voting for brands, for messages, for the stories that get told." She paused, looking around the table at the group of senior strategists and lobbyists who had been quiet until now. "They're on their phones, Senator. Not in front of a television, not at some dusty rally. If we don't speak to them where they are, we'll lose them. The next election won't be about who has the most experience. It'll be about who knows how to speak directly to the people, to the voters who decide things in their living rooms at 11 p.m., scrolling through Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. We're not playing the same game anymore. We're playing a different one, and I'm ready to win it." The room fell silent for a moment, the tension thickening the air between them. The senator shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening. He wasn't used to this. His usual condescending smile faltered as he glanced at his colleagues, hoping for some sign of agreement. Instead, he got nothing but silence. Karoline knew she had them on the ropes. She didn't need to convince them all at once, just the right ones. She needed to plant the seed and let it grow, and soon, they'd realize that the future of politics wasn't about who could shout the loudest in the room. It was about who could control the conversation from behind a screen, who could use every like, share, and comment to shape the narrative. "So," she continued, leaning back in her chair, eyes never leaving the senator's face, "if you want to keep doing things the old way, go ahead. But don't expect me to sit here and pretend that's going to work anymore. The people are changing. The voters are changing. And if we want to win, we have to change with them." The air hung heavy with Karoline's words. The older men around the table exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. But Karoline wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. She had already won. The next few days were a blur. Karoline wasn't accustomed to being the one who broke the rules. She wasn't the type to make waves, at least not in the traditional sense. But this time, it felt different. She had ignited something, and now the pressure to prove she was right weighed heavily on her. The conference room had been tense, but this was something else. She had barely slept, barely eaten, constantly glued to her phone, scrolling through the endless stream of responses to her tweet. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some congratulatory, some skeptical, but there was one message that stood out from all the others. It came late one night, the screen of her phone glowing in the darkness of her apartment. She had just finished reading through the daily reports on voter trends when the name at the top of the message caught her attention, Senator Richards. She tapped the notification, feeling a rush of adrenaline surge through her veins. "We need to talk," the message said, followed by a phone number. No signature, no pleasantries. Just those words. Karoline's mind raced as she stared at the screen. She had expected to hear from someone else in the party, maybe even one of her allies from the digital team, but not Senator Richards. Not now, after everything had been set in motion. But there was no mistaking the gravity of his message. He needed something, and she had no idea what. She didn't hesitate. She dialed the number. The phone rang twice before it picked up, and Karoline's breath caught in her throat when she heard the senator's voice on the other end. "Karoline," he said, his tone flat and direct, "I'm not sure what game you're playing, but I don't like it. You stirred something up, and now the whole party is scrambling. You've made things difficult for us." Her grip tightened around the phone. She hadn't expected this kind of response. "Difficult for you?" She shot back, her voice sharp. "You're still thinking in old terms. You're still thinking that you can control the message. But you can't anymore. People don't trust you. They don't trust the system. They want change, Senator. And you can't give it to them." There was a long pause on the other end. She could hear him breathing, clearly weighing his next words. "Maybe I'm not the one who can, but the people you've dragged into this mess certainly can't either. You've made this personal, Karoline. I've got people in my camp who are very unhappy with your stunt." She narrowed her eyes. This is what he really wanted. Not to discuss strategy or ideas, but to intimidate her into backing down. It wasn't the first time a man like him had tried to do that. She'd been underestimated all her life, but it never worked. She wasn't the type to fold. Not now. Not ever. "I'm not backing down, Senator," she said, her words deliberate and steady. "I'm here to stay, and I'm not going anywhere. But if you think you're going to bully me into silence, you've got another thing coming." He chuckled on the other end, a low, humorless sound. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But let me be clear, you think you're in control, but you're not. I have more power than you'll ever understand. And when this backfires, and it will, I'll be the one standing. You, on the other hand, you'll be forgotten." She paused, considering her next words carefully. The urge to throw a snarky comeback at him was there, but it would do nothing. Instead, she chose a different approach. "You can try to stop me, Senator, but the truth is, you're already losing. Your way of doing things is over. Your time is over." Another silence fell between them, the tension thick and suffocating. Karoline could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind, the same gears that had been grinding in her own head for months now. She wasn't just trying to make a point with this campaign. She was trying to reshape the entire system, turn it on its head. And that meant facing people like Senator Richards head-on, dealing with their threats, their arrogance, and their ability to wield influence in ways most people didn't even understand. "Don't say I didn't warn you, Karoline," the senator finally said, his voice low and cold. "I'll make sure you regret this." The call ended before she could say another word. Karoline sat there for a long moment, staring at her phone, the last remnants of the conversation echoing in her mind. Regret it. That's what he said. She should have felt threatened, but the truth was, it just made her more certain of what she was doing. If anything, it only fueled her fire. She took a deep breath and pulled her phone back into her hands. It was time to do what she did best, control the narrative. She started typing another tweet, a statement that was as cutting as it was precise. Asterisk, threats and intimidation won't stop progress. The people are speaking. I'm listening. Let's keep moving forward. Asterisk, she hit send and watched the notifications flood in. But this wasn't just about the digital battle. This wasn't about social media anymore. It was about something far bigger. Karoline knew that the real fight was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. She wasn't just taking on the establishment. She was taking on the very fabric of a political system that had been built to shut out voices like hers. In the days that followed, Karoline found herself at the center of an unexpected storm. The backlash came quickly, not just from the senator and his allies, but from all sides. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from reporters, political insiders, and even friends who had been hesitant to get involved with her from the start. Some warned her to back off. Others asked if she had thought this through. But Karoline didn't listen. She couldn't afford to. The comments were getting nastier by the day. "She's a puppet for the digital elite," one headline read. "A political influencer, not a leader," said another. The mocking tone of the media was relentless. But through it all, Karoline stayed calm. She had one job: to push forward. The real conflict wasn't in the digital world. It was in her own mind. She could hear the senator's warning echoing in her head every time she scrolled through her feed. "You'll regret this." The weight of those words clung to her, but she wasn't going to let them define her. She had never been one to back down from a fight. And Karoline knew one thing for sure: the fight had only just begun. Days passed, and the pressure intensified. Karoline had known there would be consequences when she took her stance, but nothing could have prepared her for how quickly things escalated. She had become a lightning rod for everything people hated about the political machine. Her social media following had exploded in numbers. She was trending daily, But it was no longer just people applauding her vision. The digital space, once her playground, had now become a battleground. Every word she posted was dissected, twisted, and weaponized against her. Every message she sent, no matter how well-crafted, was met with a barrage of counterarguments and outrage. She had learned that the world, especially the world of politics, had a way of turning things against you when you tried to shake up the status quo. It wasn't just the media or the pundits anymore. It was her own team, the people who had once supported her vision, now questioning her methods. The team of strategists and digital operatives who had followed her lead were growing uneasy, voices once full of excitement now tinged with doubt. They wanted to believe in her. They wanted to be part of this revolution, but it was getting harder. Every time one of her posts went viral, she was met with a new wave of backlash, and every time they ran focus groups or tested polling data, the numbers weren't adding up. The old guard was still winning the race, and the new wave of politics, Karoline's vision, seemed to be drowning in a sea of noise. They were losing traction. "Karoline, we need to talk," one of her top digital strategists, Jake, said as he knocked on her office door. He had been one of the first to back her when she started gaining a following online, but his tone now was different, hesitant, unsure. She looked up from her laptop, her eyes still glued to the screen, the graphs of engagement numbers and polls that had been haunting her for days. "What's the matter, Jake?" she asked, not bothering to hide the weariness in her voice. The exhaustion had been building for days now, but she pushed it down, focused on the task at hand. There was no time to be tired. There was no time to doubt herself. "I'm getting nervous, Karoline. You've made waves, yes, but have you seen the numbers in the swing states? We're losing ground with the older demographics. They don't get this digital-first approach. They don't trust it. In the media, it's relentless. People are getting scared of what you're doing. You're pushing too fast, too hard. It's alienating the very people we need to win over." His voice was more urgent now, his hands gripping the back of her chair, trying to make her see the gravity of the situation. Karoline didn't look up immediately. She was tired of hearing about the numbers, tired of hearing about how the digital revolution she was spearheading wasn't connecting with certain voters. She'd heard it all before. You can't change things overnight. You need to play by the rules. Take it slow. Build trust. All of it felt like chains to her. They were telling her to stop, to retreat, to slow down, and she refused to do that. She was going to fight for change, no matter what. "I know what I'm doing, Jake," Karoline said finally, lifting her head and meeting his eyes. There was no doubt in her gaze, only determination. "You're talking about the same old system. It's not working anymore. If we keep doing things the way they've always been done, we'll lose. We'll lose to people who don't care about the future, who care only about maintaining their power. What I'm doing is building something new. It's going to take time. We're going to take some hits. But we have to keep going." Jake let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing his face with both hands. "I get it. I do. But it's starting to feel like we're swimming upstream here. Maybe you're right about the future, but what if it's not happening as fast as you think? What if the country isn't ready for it? What if who?" "Jake, I don't have time for what-ifs. What if we keep playing by the same old rules? What if we keep allowing the same people to win just because they're comfortable and entrenched? This is bigger than us, bigger than any one candidate or party. If we don't make this change now, we'll be stuck in this cycle forever. I can't live with that. And neither should you." Her voice was steady, but there was a fire in her eyes that made Jake hesitate. He didn't answer immediately, but she could tell from the way he shifted his weight and crossed his arms that he was wrestling with something. The uncertainty in the room was palpable now. She wasn't used to people questioning her. She wasn't used to feeling like maybe, just maybe, she didn't have all the answers. It was disorienting, but she couldn't afford to let it show. Not now. Not in front of him. The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of what had been said. Karoline's thoughts raced. She couldn't back down. She had to be stronger than this doubt, stronger than the fear that was creeping into her own mind. It wasn't just her reputation on the line anymore. It was the entire movement. The pressure was crushing, but it only solidified her resolve. "I'm not asking for permission to change things, Jake," she said, her voice quieter now, but still firm. "I'm telling you what's going to happen. And if you want to be part of that change, you need to keep up. But if you don't believe in it, if you can't see what's coming, then maybe it's time to rethink where you stand." He looked at her for a long moment before finally nodding, slowly, as if he had come to some quiet decision in his mind. "All right, I'll keep pushing. But I'm telling you, Karoline, this could get ugly. You're pissing off a lot of powerful people. They won't just sit back and let this slide. They'll fight back, and they won't stop. Karoline straightened in her chair, her eyes hardening with a newfound resolve. Let them. I'm not going anywhere. Jake nodded again, a reluctant respect settling between them. All right, but you need to be prepared. For everything. Because once this takes off, there's no turning back. As he left her office, Karoline sat back, staring at the wall for a moment. The tension was rising, thick and suffocating, but she was determined to push through it. There would be no turning back. Not now. Not ever. The storm was coming, but she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready. The real fight was about to begin, and Karoline Leavitt wasn't going to be the one who flinched. It had been weeks since Karoline's digital campaign started gaining real traction. The media had stopped calling her a mere influencer and started using terms like disruptor and maverick. The momentum was undeniable, and every time the digital world seemed to calm down, something else would spark the next round of chaos. Karoline had seen it all, the constant headlines, the storm of comments, the well-coordinated smear campaigns designed to bring her down. She had expected it. She'd been ready for it. But there was something different about this moment, something she couldn't ignore. The backlash was getting personal. It started with a video. It was nothing special on the surface, just another protester holding a sign at a rally, shouting about how out of touch Karoline was with the everyday working person. But the video had a twist. The protester was someone she knew, someone she had worked with in the past. It wasn't just some random face in the crowd, it was part of her team, someone she had trusted. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence, some kind of social media stunt. She knew how the game was played. People manipulated the system all the time. But when the person in the video started speaking, Karoline's stomach dropped. The words they used weren't just criticisms of her politics, they were personal attacks. They started questioning her authenticity, accusing her of being a sellout. The language was familiar, the tone cutting. But the real gut punch came at the end, when the protester said, "I used to believe in her, but now I see she's just another puppet for the corporate elites. I won't be part of this anymore." The video spread like wildfire. Social media platforms were flooded with reactions. People from all sides were weighing in, but the sentiment was clear, people were starting to doubt her. This wasn't just an external attack anymore. It was coming from inside her own camp, and Karoline had no idea how to fix it. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she'd ever felt. Karoline stood in front of her office window, staring out at the city below. The world felt different now, more hostile, more unforgiving. She had built this campaign on trust, on the idea that she was the voice of a new generation, someone who was willing to speak the truth no matter the cost. But now, it seemed like the very people who had believed in her were the ones turning on her. It was as if everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for, was slipping through her fingers. The knock at her door snapped her out of her thoughts. She didn't need to be told who it was. She could already feel the weight of the conversation that was about to take place. She wasn't ready for it, but there was no avoiding it. "Karoline, we need to talk," Jake said as he walked in, his face tight with concern. The last few weeks had worn on him too. His hair, usually neatly combed, was starting to look a little ragged, and his eyes had the same hollow look that Karoline was all too familiar with. "I saw the video," Karoline said before he could speak. Her voice was sharp, her frustration bubbling just below the surface. She didn't need an explanation. She knew exactly what had happened. What she didn't know was how to fix it. "I don't know what happened," Jake said, running a hand through his hair. He looked almost defeated. "I thought we were all on the same page. I thought we were all in this together. But it's clear now that something went wrong. Someone's been leaking information, planting ideas, and I can't figure out who. It's all falling apart. I trusted that team," Karoline said, her voice breaking for the first time. "I thought we were a family, that we all believed in the same thing. But now it feels like I'm surrounded by people who just want to tear me down." Jake took a step forward, his eyes locking onto hers with a mixture of guilt and determination. "I don't know if it's sabotage, Karoline, but I know this much, we can't let it define us. If we want to win this thing, we need to figure out who did this, and we need to take control back. The last thing you need right now is to be doubted by your own people." Karoline inhaled deeply, closing her eyes for a moment as she processed his words. The room felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in on her. It was true. She couldn't afford to be seen as weak, to show any kind of vulnerability. She couldn't let the chaos overwhelm her. She had to stay in control. She had to fight back. When she opened her eyes again, her gaze was clear, focused. "We need to find out who did this. We can't let them get away with it." "I'll get the team together," Jake said, already moving toward the door. "We'll start digging. But Karoline, be ready for what's coming. Whoever did this is powerful, and they won't stop until you're finished. You've got a lot of people gunning for you now." Karoline nodded, though the fear in his voice didn't sit well with her. He wasn't wrong. This was bigger than just one person trying to undermine her campaign. It was about a system trying to shut her down, to put her back in her place. She had been warned about this, had expected it, but it didn't make the reality any easier to swallow. As Jake left her office, Karoline pulled out her phone, staring at the barrage of messages coming in. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest, but she wasn't ready to give in. She was no stranger to adversity. She had fought her entire life to get to this point, and she wasn't about to let someone, anyone, take it all away from her. Not now. Not when she had come this far. She dialed a number. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. Karoline, the voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "I see you're in a bit of trouble. I told you not to push too hard, didn't I?" Her grip tightened on the phone. She recognized the voice. It was someone she thought she could trust. But now, she wasn't so sure. "I think you're the one in trouble now," Karoline said, her voice icy. "And I'm coming for you." There was a brief pause before the voice on the other end chuckled softly. "You don't know what you're up against, Karoline. You never did." And with that, the line went dead. The silence that followed felt deafening. She had underestimated how deep the opposition ran. But now, there was no turning back. It was no longer just about the campaign. It was about survival. And Karoline Leavitt wasn't about to let them win. The days after that phone call were a blur of activity. Karoline's mind raced with possibilities, trying to piece together who might be behind the attack on her credibility. She could feel the pressure of the clock ticking down. The election was looming, and she couldn't afford to let this distraction derail everything she had worked for. The team worked overtime, analyzing every data point, every piece of information that could give them a lead. They scoured the digital landscape for clues, combing through anonymous accounts, cross-referencing old contacts. But the more they dug, the more the situation seemed to spiral. Every new lead seemed to open up 10 more questions. Then came the breakthrough. It wasn't a major revelation, just a small detail that had been overlooked earlier. Karoline's digital strategist, Jake, had noticed an IP address that had been pinging from places connected to her own team. It wasn't conclusive on its own, but it was enough to get them moving in the right direction. After a few tense hours, they found what they were looking for. The person behind the leak was someone Karoline had trusted completely. It was someone who had been in her inner circle for years, Megan, her chief communications officer. The news hit like a freight train. Karoline had always believed that Megan was one of the few people who truly understood her vision. They had spent countless late nights discussing strategy, pushing boundaries, challenging the old political system. Karoline had trusted Megan with the most sensitive information, had leaned on her during moments of doubt. But now, it was clear that Megan had betrayed her in the worst way possible. It wasn't just about the leak. It was about the intent behind it. Megan had deliberately tried to destroy everything Karoline had built, all because she didn't believe in the movement's direction. The discovery left Karoline feeling like her entire foundation had cracked. She'd known that her campaign wasn't going to be easy, that there would be people who wanted to tear it down. But she hadn't expected it to come from someone she had trusted. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had experienced so far. It made her question everything, her decisions, her judgment, her ability to read people. She had let her guard down, and now it was too late to undo the damage. The confrontation with Megan was inevitable. Karoline called her into her office, and the air between them was thick with tension as they both knew what was coming. Megan sat across from her, her eyes darting nervously, clearly avoiding eye contact. Karoline didn't waste any time. She got straight to the point. "You did it," Karoline said, her voice cold. "You've been working against me this whole time." Megan didn't respond at first. She seemed to shrink under Karoline's gaze, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Karoline waited, letting the silence stretch between them, until Megan finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to do it," she said, almost pleading. "I believed in you at first, Karoline. I really did. But this whole thing, it's too much. The pressure, the media, the constant fighting. I didn't think it was going to be like this. I didn't think we were going to become targets. I thought if I could just steer things in a different direction, I could make it all easier. I thought I could protect us from the chaos, from the storm that's coming. But I was wrong." Her voice trailed off, as though she was finally realizing the gravity of her own actions. Karoline's anger simmered, but there was something else there too, a deep, crushing disappointment. You didn't think it was going to be like this? You didn't think it would be hard? What did you think, Megan? That change was going to come easy? That we just waltz in and fix everything without anyone pushing back? You're telling me you didn't believe in what we were doing? You didn't believe in me? Megan's face turned pale, and she shook her head, her shoulders slumping. I did. I really did. But I'm scared, Karoline. I'm scared of everything this is turning into. It's bigger than I ever imagined, and I don't know how to handle it anymore. I couldn't handle watching you get torn apart by it. And I thought, she paused, almost as if she was going to cry. I thought if I could just slow things down, make it more palatable for the people who didn't understand, I could make you look better. I was trying to protect you in my own way. Karoline's hands clenched into fists as the weight of Megan's words settled in. You think betraying me, leaking everything, trying to destroy everything I've worked for was protecting me? You think that's the way to do it? Megan's eyes filled with tears. I was trying to save us from failing. I thought we were going to lose anyway, so I tried to stop the inevitable. I didn't want to watch you crash and burn. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Karoline's mind was spinning. She had trusted Megan. She had given her power, influence, and access to her campaign. And now, that trust was shattered. But amidst all the anger and frustration, there was something else, something Karoline hadn't expected. She felt pity for Megan. The fear, the self-doubt, the confusion, it was all there. Megan hadn't done it out of malice. She had done it out of fear. Fear of failure. Fear of the unknown. I won't forgive you for this, Karoline said, her voice trembling with emotion. But I'm not going to destroy you either. I won't let you be the reason I fail. You need to leave. Now. And if you ever try to come back, I won't hesitate to make sure everyone knows what you did. Megan stood up, her face crumpled with shame. She said nothing else before walking out of the office, her footsteps echoing in the silence that followed. Karoline sat there for a long time, her heart heavy. The betrayal stung, but she knew it was necessary. She couldn't let anyone undermine what she had built, no matter who they were. As the days passed, the campaign regrouped. The team rallied around Karoline, and slowly, they started rebuilding. They took the digital fight straight to the people who tried to tear her down, not backing down, not showing any weakness. When the election finally came, Karoline stood at the podium, the weight of the campaign, and the betrayal behind her. She didn't know what the outcome would be. She didn't know if she would win. But she knew one thing for sure. She had fought, truly fought, for something she believed in. And in the end, that was enough.